It's, Mike is not.
Oh, it's okay. Oops.
Is that what? Okay. What's it supposed to be hooked up to? Is this supposed to be hooked up to something? This how?
It is hooked up to right here. So you would use these. If you can't hear, sometimes it's really hard to hear.
Okay.
And that. All right, good evening, everyone. The time is 6:04. We are ready to call the HB581 public comment hearing to order. Let us start with roll call. Dr. Hooker, if you're ready.
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Heidi Hensley.
Here.
Ms. Mary P. Bagby. Here. Ms. Linda Davis.
Here.
Dr. Patricia Yeager.
Here.
Mr. Tim Denson.
Here.
Dr. Mumby Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Lakeisha Gant. Ms. Nicole Hull.
Here.
And Mr. Mark Evans.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hooker, and it looks like we've got a quorum, so we can move forward. Agenda item number 3 is to approve the agenda as presented to us. Can I get a motion?
I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, motion made by Ms. Hull, seconded by Dr. Yeager. All in favor, raise your hand high, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes. Now we will move on to agenda item number 4, and that is our presentation of House Bill 581 by our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Chris Greiner.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Give me a second here to get set up. All right. Lisa, is it on? Green. Okay. Got it. Okay. All right. Just wanted to kind of do a quick overview of House Bill 581. Basically the same information we shared back in November and December. We do have some updated numbers from the tax commissioner. I think the initial numbers we had did not factor in exemption SC, which we'll talk about. So when we go over those numbers, you'll see a change on those. So we did receive that information at the end of last week. Excuse me. So just a refresher on House Bill 581. In the general election on November 5th, it did pass. It covers homesteaded property. What is homesteaded property? It's the primary residence of a homeowner. House Bill 581 establishes a statewide floating homestead exemption, which limits the annual increase in property tax assessments on homesteaded properties mentioned above to the inflation rate of the previous year. So for example, and this is totally an example, if a home increases in value by 5%, but the previous year inflation rate is 2%, the home will only be valued at 2% more. The issue with the inflationary rate right now is that will be set by the revenue commissioner for the state of Georgia. We have, and when we look at the example of numbers, we're basically using the consumer price index. That has not been decided yet if that will be the index. I have not seen any comment from the revenue commissioner as to what index will be used. In various seminars and trainings I've been to, there's a lot of speculation as to what that will look like. Most everybody's using the consumer price index at this time, just for example purposes. One thing in Clark County, we do have, as I mentioned, exemption SC. So at the age of 65, homeowners in Clark County may apply for an exemption which freezes the assessed value of their property. So the only way they would pay additional taxes is with any millage rate increases or less tax with a decrease. So House Bill 581 does not apply to this group of homeowners in that sense that their property is already frozen. So one thing with House Bill 581, whether staying in it or opting out, all existing exemptions remain the same. So this doesn't affect any other local or state exemptions. Based on our knowledge, school systems basically have one opportunity to opt out. That's just kind of what we keep hearing. It's not really written down that's necessarily, but that's kind of what everybody's going with that guidance at this time. So we have that one opportunity. Just a refresher of our school system finances for the FY25 budget. Property taxes account for roughly 57% of our general fund revenue. The budget for property taxes is $135 million. It's based on 18.8 mills. 1 mil of property tax in Athens, Clark County is equivalent to roughly $7.2 million. So these are the template that was designed by another RISA here in Georgia that school districts are using. It basically says, what if House Bill 581 had been in effect the last 6 years? So it takes the value of the property of the homestead, which we receive at 40% from the tax commissioner. It uses, as I mentioned, the consumer price index, so it's 4.1% for 2024. And then the last column would be the amount of revenue decrease we would have realized as a school district if it had been in effect. So roughly a little over $1 million for 2024. Down at the very bottom, you can see what the cumulative loss is, about $7.4 million over that 6-year period. Again, these numbers are adjusted. I think last time we looked at this, we were close to $2 million. I will say that index number is the key to this whole equation. If you reduce that down to 2%, you're looking at about a $1.5 million loss. So it's again, what's that index going to be for the revenue commissioner, and we don't know that at this time. So what are the pros of House Bill 581? It does reduce the tax burden for homeowners who are not already eligible for exemption SC. The pros of opting out of House Bill 581 is the local control piece. And what we mean here is, with any we can work with our local legislators to design specific legislation just for Athens, Clark County. Other school districts have done this, where we could potentially come up with our own floating homestead exemption, maybe some different criteria than what the state used. It's not a statewide exemption. We feel like every county is different. There's specific community needs and physical conditions within that county. The other thing that we can control is the millage rate. As a board, y'all set the millage rate every year. By opting out, we could potentially avoid having to raise the millage rate to make up for that lost revenue. That would essentially, if we did that, you're going to shift the tax burden to our businesses, investment properties, which ultimately would affect renters here in Athens, Clark County, as well as it would, any millage rate, as I mentioned, would affect those that are under exemption SC as well. Other considerations as we look towards the budget for FY26, potential further health insurance cost increases. I will say that the governor did his initial press release yesterday. He's proposing raising both certified and classified health insurance again this year. So we're looking at that health insurance increase. Of course, it has to go through the whole legislative session. So at this time, we don't know if that's going to pass, but he did propose that yesterday. Any future property tax legislation, there were several other bills last year that did not, get final approval that we feel like are going to be brought back up this year as well again. And then we're, keeping our eyes on any reduction in our federal funding, whether it be Title I, probably not special education, but probably Title I is what we're mostly looking at there. And again, we don't know any of those numbers, but that's just other considerations. So what are our next steps? We have the first public hearing tonight. We're required by law to have 3 public hearings before the matter is, considered. So we'll have another public hearing scheduled for next Tuesday, the 21st, and then another one on the 28th. And then a board meeting, the regular board meeting on Thursday, February 13th, which at that time the board will decide whether to stay in House Bill 581 or to opt out. And that would require drafting a resolution at that meeting or having a resolution ready, approving that resolution, and all supporting documentation, which is proof of these hearings, as well as the ads that we've published in the Banner Herald, would be due to the Secretary of State by March 1st. And that has to be mailed. There is criteria that the Secretary, I think it's just school taxes. That actually, there are certain exemptions. I know this from other districts.
Kind of remark in passing, I'm looking at the other considerations, additional reductions in federal funding. You stated that we may not have to worry about a reduction for special education, but that's something that everyone is watching, right? So I guess that's a consideration. Where would this money come from? Or if we were not to have the money, federal funding that we have now to support special education, would we be able to supplement those supports and costs with this money?
That's a great question, Ms. Hull. I think any reduction in any potential federal funding, whether it be Title I, special education, would mean we would have to look at the general fund. That would mean either cutting costs at the general fund level, potentially looking at the use of fund balance to continue. I think with special education, I think the presiding theory is there's so many regulations and compliance with that piece. I don't know if they would, at the federal level, they normally don't cut it as much. Title I is the one that we typically see cut. Now, our schools do rely, all our schools are Title I, so they do rely on that funding very heavily. And most of that is in staffing. So again, it would have to be looking at the needs of that school and then trying to fill in the gap with the general fund.
All right, Mr. Dunson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Grinder, following up with that question, just so I can get clarification, making sure that I'm correct on this. When it comes to this legislation, the way it impacts local city and county governments, they were given the option of creating a FLOST, this new floating local option sales tax, to make up for that revenue. But my understanding is that school districts were not given that option to use that to make up for the revenue. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I think in conversations we had several months ago with Athens-Clarke County when we sat around the table together, I think the FLOSS would have to be approved by all the taxing municipalities. So that's, of course, Clark, I think Bogart, Winterville would have to join in that. So I think, but that is correct. That option was given to local municipalities. That was not given to school districts. And I know you know this from your time. There's also a local option sales tax that Clark County also collects already that's allowed for county and city municipalities as well.
Others? Yes, Mr. Evans.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
Let's say that we decide that we're going to opt in, and we try it, and it's terrible. It doesn't work out. Is there a process for us to opt out later?
Based on our understanding, all the seminars and trainings I've been to, it's not 100% clear on that. Everybody's under the assumption that it's kind of like, I'll use the example with Social Security back in the mid-'80s. You had the option to opt into Social Security or opt out. There's several school districts around us that made the choice to opt out. It was a one-time shot. You can't get back in. Our understanding, just based on that, is that once this is our one opportunity. So if we, and to stay in it, all we have to do is, there's really no opting in necessarily. We're in it right now. So there's no formal, the board just has to decide, do we want to opt out or not? If we don't do anything, we're in it. So just based on that guidance that and I think Dr. Hooker would agree, the seminars and webinars he's been to or trainings, everybody is presented as there's one shot at opting out of this.
So, since you brought up the other counties and Social Security, what are our sister counties doing around us? Are they opting out?
I think
what are they doing?
the majority of them are having, the intent is to opt out, and they're having public hearings. I know in our RISA group, Dr. Hooker, I believe there's only one, maybe two counties right now that are one. And then I think statewide, some data we've had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Hooker, I think it was roughly at least 70 or 80% of the school districts were planning on having public hearings.
And then the last one, and this may be a Mike Pruitt question. We have to submit paperwork to the Secretary of State by March 1st. Have they given us a template for that?
We have, a neighboring district has drafted a resolution. Mr. Pruitt shared Association of County Government, I can't get the initials, it's Association of County Commissioners and Government, I believe, and Mr. Denson, I think it's ACCG. They have a legal group within that group, and they've also come up with a draft resolution as well for any municipalities, which we could tailor for the school district. But one of our neighboring districts has actually come up with a resolution that we could look at.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there other questions? I have a couple, if that's okay, if you all would oblige me. So, Mr. Griner, remind me when the last time was that QBE funding was amended, the formula?
1985.
Okay, and so can you remind us what QBE is?
Sure, it's the mechanism that the state of Georgia uses to fund school districts. It's the Quality Basic Education Act. It's had slight changes, like teacher salaries have increased. The governor has done a really good job of that over the last several years. But as far as operational costs, they're based on 1985 numbers.
Okay.
Pupil transportation, for example, kudos to the governor for last year increasing that. Yesterday at his initial press release, I think his intent is to do that again, and we appreciate that. It still basically only funds QBE roughly 15% of our operations for transportation. So there's those areas, there's no technology funding at all within QBE. Most districts, we had this conversation this morning with our COC committee, bus purchases, there's really no room in QBE for any of that because of the pupil transportation I just mentioned, so that has to come from SPLOST. So it's a formula that has worked over the years, but it definitely needs some tweaking at this point in time.
And there are certain positions, personnel, that are not funded at all by QBE, correct? That are funded exclusively by our general funds, correct?
Right, that's the majority of our classified positions. QBE basically covers the majority of our certified positions. We tend, with our smaller class sizes, we tend to have roughly about 60 teaching positions more than what we're allowed in QBE. Classified, so our custodial, our maintenance, transportation piece is slightly covered, but not a whole lot. So all those positions are basically funded through the local property tax.
Okay. And remind me, are some of our behavioral health services and mental health and physical health services, so additional nurses, additional social workers, we have our healthcare centers and several of our schools, some of those positions we fund exclusively through our general funds, right?
That is correct. We
Okay.
do receive funding, again, from the state for nurses, but it is a very inadequate amount that we need. And then as well as mental health services. I know the governor is placing an emphasis on that, so we're hoping there'll be some additional funding for that. But QBE really doesn't address any of those specific needs.
Okay, and then if you all will oblige me, I have just 2-3 more questions. Okay, so the lion's share of our general fund expenditures in the county go to what?
Salary and benefits.
Okay.
Roughly, like other school districts, roughly about 86% of our general fund budget is salary and benefits.
So if I'm correct, I'm trying to follow you here. Okay. So our general fund is largely from property taxes.
Roughly 57%.
Okay. So 57% of our general fund is from property taxes. Close to 90% of our general fund expenditures are for personnel.
That's
People
correct.
who live and work in this school district.
Yeah.
fringe.
Right, and that's been the biggest increase, it's been on the benefit side
Okay.
with health insurance. Because again, with our classified employees, we receive no assistance from the state with health insurance at all, and it's continued to, it's basically at the same level we're having to fund for our teachers, we're funding for classified right now.
Okay. So if we opted in to House Bill 581 permanently, right? Like, once we opt in once, we're done. And let's say property taxes freeze, right? And we have 5-year increase year by year of student enrollment, which then means 5-year increase year by year of personnel. Where does that funding come from to pay for the personnel that live and work in this county for CCSD?
Right, I mean, you still would have, assuming the tax digest is continuing to grow, we are fortunate here to have a large commercial base to our tax digest. It's not, I've been in other districts where it's more residential. We do have a commercial piece. So you would have the increase in property taxes on our commercial property and those pieces. And you still would have an increase on the homesteaded property. It would just be based on that inflationary number. The original bill, as it was written, was to really, I think, to cap it at 3%. It had some issues with the language, so this was I think the compromise that came out of when the House and the Senate got together last year. This was the compromise bill. I think originally it was just going to play, there was going to be no inflationary index. It was going to be a flat cap of 3%.
Okay. Okay. I think that's my only question. Yes, Ms. Davis? Or, sorry, Ms. Bagby?
Yes, Ms. Bagby.
Could you explain what you meant about the money would not affect Title I as opposed to special ed? So,
I think what our concern is that Title I might be affected. We saw a slight reduction last year in our Title I funding. We believe there's going to be additional reductions in Title I funding. Special education, we have not seen the same reductions, so we feel like we won't see those same reductions. And again, we don't know, and it's a year by year. It's decisions that's made at the federal level as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over this next year.
Yes, Ms. Hensley?
And just to get a full picture of our county and Title I, so you said that Title I doesn't necessarily pay for our certified, it actually does pay for personnel, extra personnel. Is this like EIP interventions? Like what exactly is Title I?
We give the schools flexibility with that, with their funding. Typically, it is on the intervention side, whether it be a behavior interventionist, an academic interventionist, and I'll let Dr. Scott correct me if I'm, but I think that's the majority of it goes to that. Every now and then, we do put a certified position in there if the school feels like they do have some flexibility within their point structure we give them for allotments, and whatever their Title I budget ends up being, that they do have some room in there. But a lot of times, it's extra support in the classroom.
And what qualifies us as Title I? Is it scores? Is it?
It's mainly based on our poverty ratios, free and reduced lunch. There's a certification process you do. It really all kind of flows through the school nutrition side.
Okay.
Direct certificate. There's other criteria. I miss anything, Dr. Hooker? I think that's. Yeah.
Thank you.
And just so you know, it's about $11 million is what I know from Donna Elder. This past year, our Title I money was $11 million. I think that's correct. Does that sound right, Dr. Hooker?
I believe you're correct, and if I'm not mistaken, our Title I budget this year was cut by 25%. 15%. It was cut 15% from the federal government this year.
And we also lost, we had, I think it was three schools that had additional funding, which was called school improvement, right? Like SIG funding is what it was called. We also, every district across the state of Georgia lost that funding this year. So that greatly affected 3 of our schools. We were fortunate to be able to, absorb those positions where we basically told the school leaders they're going to have to kind of think outside the box this upcoming school year and try to figure out how to make that work. So we kind of gave them a 1-year grace period this year. So.
And so that money is coming now out of our general funds until,
It is. We also had some of our ESSER money that we had remaining, which was about $3 million, we were able to reclassify and absorb some of the health insurance costs. So we actually used a portion of that money to kind of account for that loss of funding this year.
okay.
But we won't have, ESSER, of course, ended in September, so we won't have that funding going forward.
And I'm correct in Title I impacts very specific schools. So it's schools that fall within or below a particular poverty level.
Right.
So it's not the entire school district that gets the $11 million. It's, I think, about 11 schools.
It's the entire.
Maybe even less.
We're actually a
Is it the
Title I
ent-
district. So
Oh, we're
our-
Title, okay,
yeah.
okay.
I
All
think
right,
at
thank
one
you.
point in time, we've had several schools that were close to coming out of the Title I piece, but
Mm-hmm.
right now, every school is considered a Title I school.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there other questions?
I do
before
remember
we-
my question now.
Oh, yes, Ms. Davis?
Okay, so when you were talking about the school district's ability to raise money, right, we were talking about a millage rate, and we're currently at 18.8.
18.8.
So the most we could possibly raise is 1.2, raise our millage rate is 1.2 mils, and we're capped.
That is correct.
And so-
There's, a lot of talk over the years of trying to raise that cap. There's only a few districts that got grandfathered in. I think DeKalb, Fulton, in that area, there's a couple. But yes, that is correct. As it stands right now, 20 is the most. So 1.2 mils would roughly be, if you look at the value of a mill right now, that's about 8 or 9 million roughly.
Okay. That's what I was looking for, is what does that number look like if we were pushed into that position of having to have a millage rate to meet the budgetary needs? And so about 8 million is what we're talking about.
Right. And we still have our general fund balance, we're roughly right around 21% right now. We did, of course, use reserves for this year. Typically, hopefully, again, this year, we're conservative with that budget and we won't end up using all that money we allocated for reserves. So that's my goal every year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so, just to add on to Ms. Davis's line of questions, increasing the millage rate to 20 from 18.8 to meet that windfall, to meet that reduction in our property tax, that impacts our 65-plus population who are frozen on property taxes.
Right. I think
correct?
Dr. Yeager made that point. I think it was in December. It does. It's the only thing that would affect them because their property value is frozen would be any changes to the millage rate,
To the
either up
millage
or
rate.
down. So,
Okay. So increasing the millage rate impacts our 65-plus population, but freezing property taxes or increasing property taxes does not.
right.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Ms. Bagby?
You said all of the schools are Title I schools. Are all of the schools equipped for special ed situations?
Yes, ma'am. They are.
Thank you.
Okay. Others? Yes, Mr. Denson?
Thank you, and I think, so, Mr. Griner, you talked about by doing this, another impact of raising the millage rate, if that was what has to happen eventually, would be that this would likely cause increases in rent for those who rent in Athens-Clarke County. So that's fair to say. So I think it's also important for us to realize that basically 60% of households in Athens-Clarke County are renters, and 65.3% of female-led households, single moms with children, 65.3% of them are renters. So when we talk about, while there would be a smaller percentage of Athens residents would be benefited from this financially, while a majority of Athens-Clarke County residents would likely actually be hurt by doing this. So I think it's another important thing for us to think about.
Just for clarity, can you specify what this is? You were saying by doing this, or you mean
I'm saying,
supporting-
if we were to actually enforce this inflation causing homestead freeze.
Okay. Are there other questions, comments? All right, I think the board is satisfied with your presentation. Thank you so much for your patience
All right.
on that line of questioning. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you. I'm
All
gonna
right.
leave this on for public comment.
Okay, sounds good. All right, we are now ready to move on to item 5 of our agenda, and that is public comment. I have a list of speakers. We collected this list at 6 p.m. So if there are speakers present who are not on this list, it's because they did not sign up, and we can address that once we've gone down the list of speakers who did sign up. Before we get ready for public comment, I would like to go ahead and remind our speakers of our policy BCBI for public comment, and that is each individual speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak, and at this point, remarks must be concluded. No speaker will indulge in personal attacks, and all comments are to be addressed directly to the Board of Education. To protect the privacy of students, speakers shall refrain from identifying specific students by name. No individual or group shall be retaliated against in any manner for speaking during public participation. Personal concerns may be addressed in writing to the superintendent and the president of the Board of Education. Written copies of comments may also be provided to the board. At a board meeting, board members will not respond to questions or comments from the public. The district may respond to public input as needed or appropriately within 10 working days. And lastly, the use of obscene, profane, vulgar, physically threatening, or abusive remarks will not be allowed. Loud and boisterous conduct of speakers, or comments by speakers or members of the audience are also not allowed. And now we will move to our first speaker on the list, and that is Jeb Bradbury.
My name's Jeb Bradbury. I worked in the Board of Assessors for the last 12 years. But the one number that sticks out in my head is 30,167. Do any of y'all know what that number is? That is the number of votes that the voters in Athens, Clarke County, 62%, voted to pass 581. And for you people to sit here and even consider that you're not going to opt into this is just befuddles me. I sent you all an email. I hope you read it. I can't put into words in 3 minutes a lot of the stuff that I put into the email. So I will just start. If student spending were a direct correlation to success in the classroom, we would have the #1 school district in the state. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Clarke County spends over $19,000 out of the M&O budget. If you include SPELOS funds, it's much, much higher than that. It's almost more than attending the University of Georgia, including tuition, books, dorm room, and a meal plan. Think about that and let that sink in for a minute. The other systems around us, Barrow, Madison, Oglethorpe, and Oconee, average less than $16,000 per student. I'm not here to argue about school or school student performance. We can do that another day. I'm here to say that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. You have way more than enough money to run this school system. Thank you.
Sorry. All right, our next speaker is Michael McClendon. Michael McClendon? Okay. Our next speaker is Joan Roden.
In respect for the office, I need to tell you that I cannot unsee what I see. In a culture that speaks boldly of protecting our democracy, it is appalling to see this body attempt to override the vote of the people of Clarke County. The November 5th referendum garnered an impressive 62% Clark votes to uphold the homestead exemption on referendum 1. It is now law, yet the Clark County Board of Education will call for 3 public hearings with public comment and numerous avenues of voicing opposition to this opt-out overreach. Is this democracy or autocracy? With deep conviction and a plethora of facts and figures, I oppose this attempt to opt out of HB 581. It is an attempt to override the democratic vote in a free and fair election. With less than stellar data coming out of the Clark County Public School System and a board that has been charged to appropriate and budget the people's money in order to provide not only optimum education, but fiscal excellence, this opt-out pathway is an embarrassment to Clark County as well as the Board of Education. What could the average parent do with $19,000 a year, close to $2,000 per month, to adequately and exceptionally educate their children? The voucher option was also approved by the voters of Georgia, knowing that $19,000 per year of taxpayer funds could put a lot of children in high-performing schools that do not have to give out free breakfast and lunch to every student, whether needy or not. The fiscal arrogance of this body is an affront to hardworking, taxpaying, engaged property owners in Clark County. In closing, it would be a moral crime if you presume that I do not care about education, children, teachers, and opportunities for every sector of K-12. The people of Athens care, but we will not stand by and watch millions of dollars funnel through a board that proves year after year that you cannot live within your means. To do so is so irresponsible. I ask you to oppose the opt-out option and tighten your belt. It's a perfect time to adjust your collective addiction to spending other people's money with impunity. This budgetary runway train is headed for disaster. You inflict financial demands on the very people for which you indicate that you are trying to serve. Thank you.
Steve Middlebrooks.
Dr. Hooker and board, thank you. I'd be repetitive to say the same thing you've already heard, but I'll say it again. 62% of the citizens have already voted. And I would ask you to please honor that. I am a proponent, just like everybody in here, of the Clark County school system. My 2 boys went there at Clark Central, graduated, very active in the mentor program, Books for Keeps program. I could go on and on. I want to support Clark County school system. However, we talk about millage rates and taxes. I wrote a check for $136,751.41 for school taxes. $136,000. You have a budget. We have a budget. Everybody in here has a budget. And respectfully, sometimes in good times, we're spendthrift. Sometimes when things are tight, we have to tighten our belt. But the current proposal does provide for increases, as already been mentioned by Mr. Greiner. I would tell you something that's extremely important, and I'll cite my business, and I'll cite one of our businesses, Toyota. I get the same tax information from 3 of the Metro Atlanta Toyota dealerships. I pay 16.2% more in taxes than they do. Think about that. Metro Atlanta versus Athens, Georgia. I pay 16.2%. So we're taxed out. We're taxed out. So I would ask you to please honor the requests that have been voted on as well as mentioned here tonight. Thank you.
Larry Jordan.
Normally, I come prepared with a speech. I don't have anything prepared to speak. I do want to say that you guys do not know how to manage your budget. I hope you do better at your personal budget than you do in the Clark County budget. I've spoken in front of this group before when you tried to raise, and you did. You don't listen to us. You did raise the budget last year. You've got a spending problem. You've got some of the worst schools in all of Georgia, which you should not be proud of. I registered, there's 2 doctors sitting out there at least. I'm not sure what your education is, but it isn't in how to manage money. So you maybe want to go back to school and get another doctorate in how to manage money.
Excuse me, personnel attacks are not allowed.
I don't know who I was attacking, I just
Personnel
heard 2
attacks are not,
doctors.
you said you have 2 doctors
Okay.
up here. Personnel attacks
Yeah, I
are
don't
not
know
allowed.
who they are. So
Sir,
I'm just,
sir, your comment is over. Public comment, public insults are not allowed.
what's your name?
Dr. Anderson.
You're one of the doctors, okay.
She said what she said, thank you. Did you call
All
the
right.
next person?
David Paul Lamar.
Good evening. I have the art of an educator. I spent 17 years teaching music in Richmond County, Georgia, ranging from middle school to pre-K. I never achieved as much as I wanted in the middle school chorus, but we did receive a superior rating for the elementary chorus from Freedom Park Elementary School. My last degree was a specialist in educational leadership, so you can see the heart I bring to this. Nevertheless, my wife and I understand exemptions from taxes, and we understand the average family in Clark County, because we're seniors fixed on, on a fixed income, still paying a mortgage. When we lived in Richmond County, we did not have to pay the school tax when we reached 65. So that's been a challenge for us here. Helene recently put limbs down on our house, and we had to get that repaired, and we had to borrow money to do that. So you can just see the situation. So I have a heart for people out here in the community just trying to live from day to day and go to the grocery store and pay for what they have. And they don't need extra taxes. They need some tax, they need a savior for that. Thirdly, furthermore, I am a constitutionalist. I believe in government of the people, by the people, for the people. I oppose the opt-out of the homestead exemption for the Clark County Board of Education, House Bill 581. And along with the others who said this, we see that 62% of the voters voted for this. The Board of Education should follow a majority of the voters. If the Board of Education chooses to opt out, it will nullify the will of the people and will disenfranchise the voters who voted. Please do not opt out of the homestead exemption. Thank you.
Pam Shropshire.
"62% of the people, the voters in this county, have spoken about what they want. If y'all want to know why everybody's moving to adjacent counties, it's because of the taxes. We need help. And this is for the businesses and the residential people that want to stay in Clark County. 62%, that's a significant amount of voters that voted on this. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Linda Krotke.
Hello. I am in total agreement with what I've heard so far. I would have said some of those things, but I don't need to necessarily repeat them. I wanted to tell you a story. I am a former teacher of Barrow County. In Barrow County is at the time was a much poorer county. And we were always hearing about Athens Clark County schools. Go see what they've got. They've got this shiny new thing. They've got this nice, wonderful smart board. They've got the best equipment. They get it the fastest. Let's go look at their schools. And we did. And we came. And we said, well, they've got really nice technology. But the scores here are terrible. Some of the worst in the state. So you want more money to what? Mismanage? I think perhaps there's money can be spent in other ways. My suggestion is you put forth so much money, K through 3, get everybody reading on grade level, and the rest of it's going to be easy. In addition, the voters did vote on it. I don't know how you can opt out. I know it's a great incentive for you to opt out and get more money. But to mismanage more money, no purpose in that. Thank you.
Let me take just a quick second here. Hold on just a second. All right, we've got Mara Zuniga.
Good evening. I am part of the 62%, and I'm here as both a business owner and a homeowner. First, let me tell you, as a business owner, I've been here since 2019 with my own business. We have had our costs go up. We've trimmed the fat. We haven't lost an employee. We haven't lost a client. Yes, we'd have to, balance ourselves because that's our budget. As a homeowner, I have a family, 2 working people, and we've also had to cut our costs because of our budget. So I do believe in budgets, and I know your decision is very difficult in this. But you're dealing with families sometimes that have 2 jobs, and they have kids that go to the school, or they rent. As Mr. Denson said, there's a lot of renters here in town. They're being affected. Now, as a business owner, I've had to struggle myself. And as a mom, I've had 2 kids that have gone through the system. And I can tell you this much. I've pulled teeth to get my kids to graduate. They've had a lot of difficulties with the system. Now, I'm a child from Title I schools in New York, and I went to pretty bad schools, but I tell you this much, we had really good teachers. And I'm not saying we have bad teachers in the system. Far from it. I respect teachers very much in this town. But I do believe there's a mis-budgeting here, and I would like for you to consider all those factors, though I know it's very difficult for you because there's just so many things that are involved here. But I want you to concentrate and focus on the families of those children that go to your schools. They are struggling. I know, I was one of those families that put my kids through school, so thank you.
Regina Bedoun. And I apologize, everyone, if I'm mispronouncing names.
I'm impressed. My name is difficult to pronounce, and you did it perfectly. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I appreciate the chance to do that. But I must confess, it's a foreign concept to me that people in America can vote. Sorry. No, that's it. That people can vote in such a majority, and that's just brushed aside and ignored and tried to find a little runaround to beat that. We all have to live within our means, and as citizens, we don't have the ability to opt out of grocery prices, rent prices, gas prices. We don't have that. We can't make somebody else pay for our bills. We have to deal with it. And I'm asking you to please do the same. Just tighten your belts, look at things more seriously, and try to just manage with what you're given and respect the people that have employed you with their votes.
All right. And I believe this is Gordon Roden.
Good evening. I was at a conference one time, and I heard people talking about the financial stresses on their businesses and the different things. And the speaker said, I think I figured this out. If we turned the budget over to a single mom with 3 children who's having to make it on a budget, she would take care of it because she has learned how to deal with it. The problem is that, as has been mentioned, that 62% of the people in Clark County voted for this. But other than that, 35 years ago, I started a business, out of one career into another. And if you have done that as well, you realize it's not easy. It's not easy raising 3 children, you know, with Joan was a stay-at-home mom, and we were just getting by. We understand that. Our children were in public school, so we understand that. I understand the stresses that are on public school teachers. I do a lot of work with public school teachers, and I realize the stresses that are there. We are here tonight as a group to let you know we are concerned citizens. We're not here to throw rocks at anybody. We want to see a solution. I think part of my question would be, has the board ever brought together a group of citizens, not, you know, just some business owners and say, let's look at the budget. Let's look at the budget line by line, item by item, and let's see where we can shave $1,000 here, $5,000 here, and come together. When does it run out? If the millage rate goes up to 20 and it's not passed, where do we run out? The renters, you know, the rent has to go up to cover the taxes for the owners. Where does it run out? You know, the 65 that it's frozen, if the millage rate goes up, that increases on the senior citizens. Where does it go out? We talked so much in Clark County when Mr. Denson was a commissioner here in Clark County. I remember we talked about the underprivileged and the needy families here. Where does it stop? You know, so my concern for you tonight is that you would go back and look at the budget and look in long term where we need to shave some of this. I think we're managing the wreckage of the future. And I encourage you to say, let's find out what those figures are, you know, that are going to come down from the tax digest and all of this, and see where we can really manage this and bring some other people into the pool to say, like a Jed Bradbury. Thank you for your time.
I have no other people signed up on the public comment list. Are there individuals here who arrived late and did not have an opportunity to sign up? Would you like to come and speak? Please
I'll be brief.
give us your name, please.
My name's John Elliott. I'm a citizen of Clark County. And I'd just like to remind you that those 62% of the people that voted for this also voted to elect you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. That concludes our public comment for the hearing on House Bill 581. And if there are no other questions from board members or Superintendent Hooker, questions, comments? Okay. So we will now move to item number 6, and that's adjournment. Need a vote? I need motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion made by Ms. Davis and seconded by Ms. Hall. Raise your hand high and say aye.
All right.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you. Oh, and just as a reminder to the public, we do have 2 additional meetings. We've got one on the 21st and one on the 28th. Same time, same place. Thank you, everyone.